Hi guys, this is a quick recap of what we did in class today. So for the purpose of this video, I'm using period 5, but this is the same lesson no matter which class you are in, the date might be different. So this is part 1 of a 2-part lesson called Working Toward the Dream. That lesson's number is 1.22. So first there is a PDN for you to do, and then there is a document in Classroom called 1.22 Part 1. So the two things that you are doing on that document are reading a poem called Who Burns for the Perfection of Paper and completing the TP-Cast chart for that poem. So if you go into your classwork tab, you are looking for 1.22 Part 1. You'll see that there is the Google Doc for that, and then there is also a response Padlet that you need to complete after the Google Doc. So when you open up the Google Doc, there's a small section up at the top with 3 different ways that you can increase your understanding of text by connecting ideas to something that you already know. So one thing you can make connection to is personal experience. So if you read something in a text and you think of something similar that happened to you in your life, that is connecting to a personal experience. So the example here is I can relate to how the person or character is feeling because I know what it feels like to lose a big game because my team lost in the championship game last week. Another way that you can connect is to think about what you're reading and connect it to something else you have read in this class or another class. So any ideas, concepts, or facts that are similar between 2 texts. It could also be the style or structure. So if we're reading a poem and it reminds you of another poem we read because of the way it's written, that is connecting to ideas in other texts. The example here, I know about the Great Migration because we read about it in history last month. And the last one is connecting between the text and society. So if there's something going on in the text that reminds you of an event that either is happening or has happened in the world, this country, your neighborhood, that is connecting text to society. So most of what we have talked about in this class this year is about the American dream. If you are connecting that to the other day, officials announced that a major distribution center would be opening in our town, and it's going to give a lot of jobs to the people in our city. This is a real-world example of how the American dream is achieved, right? That is connecting what we've been doing in class, the text, to society. So those are just 3 ways to think about making connections between text and life. So the text for today is called Who Burns for the Perfection of Paper. It is by a poet named Martin Espada. As you are reading this poem, you have 2 different things you need to do to annotate it. The first is to underline words and phrases that show the narrator's attitude toward his work. This is also called the tone of the poem. So any place that you see a word or a phrase that you think shows how the narrator feels about the subject, you would underline that. The second thing you're looking for is highlighting any connections to the 3 different things that we just talked about up here: personal experience, other text, or society. So if you see a line that reminds you of something that happened in your own life, you would highlight that because it is a connection to personal experience. If you see a line that reminds you of something that happened in another poem that we read, that would be ideas in other texts. And if you see a line that reminds you of something that's going on in the world or has happened in the world, you can highlight that because that would be a connection to society. So I'm going to read this poem out loud for you like I did in class, and then I will explain what comes next. At 16, I worked after high school hours at a printing plant that manufactured legal pads. Yellow paper stacked 7 feet high and leaning as I slipped cardboard between the pages, then brushed red glue up and down the stack. No gloves. Fingertips required for the perfection of paper, smoothing the exact rectangle. Sluggish by 9 p.m., the hands would slide along suddenly sharp paper, and gather slits thinner than the crevices of the skin, hidden. Then the glue would sting, hands oozing till both palms burned at the punch clock. 10 years later, in law school, I knew that every legal pad was glued with the sting of hidden cuts, that every open law book was a pair of hands upturned and burning. Okay, your job after reading this poem is to fill out this TPCast chart. This is something we've been practicing over the past cycle. You are just reading the prompts for each box here and then erasing the placeholder text and writing your answers. So the first thing you're looking at is the title. What do you think the title means? You erase this and type your answer here. I have given you the answer for the paraphrase one. Paraphrasing is where you are basically summarizing what the poem is saying in your own words. So I have given you that one. My paraphrase for this is: the speaker, a law student, reflects on the hardships he went through when he worked in a factory making legal pads. That is my summary of what this poem is about. The next box is connotation, which is the implied meaning of some words. That does not mean the dictionary definition. That means, tell me some words in this poem that you think are positive, and tell me some that you think are negative. The next is attitude. What is the author's attitude about the subject? How does the author feel toward this subject? You can also think of that as tone. Next is, where is the shift in tone in this poem? So remember, most poems have a shift. They change somewhere during the poem from, say, a positive tone to a negative tone, a happy tone to a sad tone. See if you can find where that happens in this poem. Then you're looking at the title a second time. So now that you've analyzed the poem a little bit, does the title have a different or new meaning to you? And lastly, what do you think the theme of the poem is? How would you describe what the big idea is that the author wants you to get out of reading this? Once you have finished this chart, you're going to turn in this doc, and you're going to complete your exit ticket on Padlet. So there's a link to the Padlet here. There is also a link to the Padlet in the assignment on Classroom. Once you open that up, it's going to ask you to make a connection in one of the following areas between this poem and either your personal experience, ideas in other texts, or society. So if you have a similar personal experience, you would click the plus sign under this column and write about that experience. Make sure you are signed in with your Reading email, or it will not tell me who you are and I cannot grade it. So once you have done that and turned in your doc, you are done for the day.